This week on Head to Head, Snoke lives. Is he dead? Rumors say no.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars. Begins now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
We're your hosts for this podcast. So check this out. I actually got on our Head to Head Facebook page. I got this whole message from this guy, Patrick McIntosh. He's one of our listeners. He lives in Virginia. He says what the Facebook thing says. And he was bringing up some interesting things to me. He's saying that XR Kun is actually going to be canon. And that they're actually starting to...
Go kind of weave him in.
Yeah, they're kind of weaving him in. Like, there's some Sith artifacts of his or whatever that are supposedly his that were in Solo. So, I mean, how familiar are you with him?
XR Kun a little bit. I mean, I know... He's like one of those old Sith Lords and whatnot, back of the old Republic era, and probably even a little bit before then. But I know he was really powerful because I know it's like XR Kun, there's Bane, there's what's the other one?
Called Plagueis.
Plagueis, of course. And of course, Palpatine. We all know him. So I mean, there's like he's one of those kind of upper echelon Sith Lords. But that. Kind of like I want to hold off on that just a little bit because I have some thoughts that's gonna come back to that later on in this episode. So,
all right,
yeah.
Well, I remember the biggest thing. It's funny. XR Kun is actually one of my favorite Sith Lords from at least Legends. So I mean, I hope he's canonized because I think that would be cool, and it's great that Patrick actually took the time to write into that. And
yeah, thanks, man.
We encourage all of you guys, actually, write us. Let's talk about, some Star Wars stuff and hear your thoughts on our shows or whatever. All right, I guess it's time to go get that drink, huh?
Yes, my favorite part.
Yes. All right, so what do we got first in our Cantina segment?
All right, man, so I was just checking some things out throughout the week and the weekend, and there's been a lot of talk about Rian Johnson and his trilogy because, he signed on to do that three trilogy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
trilogy
right.
is three.
Even before The Last Jedi came out, they decided they liked them so much. They're like, yeah, man, come on.
So he's got his whole thing. And, of course, a lot of fans weren't so thrilled with The Last Jedi. But
that's an understatement.
So there was a lot of speculation that, they were going to actually cancel that because they were like, well... Even though The Last Jedi did make like $1 billion or something like that.
$2 billion.
$2? Okay. So it's like, okay, on one hand, it was a moneymaker, but I think it was just because everybody was so excited after The Force Awakens that people just had to go see what it was. What's the second part of that? But a lot of people were kind of like, well, we really didn't care for The Last Jedi, so can we just get rid of Rian Johnson and not let him do any more Star Wars movies? But fortunately enough, he is still slated to do his trilogy. We don't know still what era or what he's going to cover and what characters he's going to bring or if it's something new or if it's something old. But
here's what we do know. We do know that it's not going to be with any of the familiar characters that we've seen.
Right.
Nothing to do with the saga. And that's the thing. And of course, we'll talk about Rian Johnson a little later in the show.
Yeah.
But, it's one of those things where I can understand that people didn't necessarily like his direction for primarily what he did with Luke Skywalker. I honestly think that if he had done everything else that everybody had criticized, but he actually gave everybody the Luke Skywalker they expected in The Last Jedi,
they would have given him a break.
Yeah, I don't really think that there would have been the vitriol that, we've experienced. So you got to understand that his style of directing is actually cool. If you apply that to an unfamiliar story, it's like a brand new story, I think people will actually be a little bit more receptive, as long as, of course, they like the story. I mean, there's a possibility that they're just like, well, we just don't like this at all.
Just don't like it.
I just don't like it. But that's a Frasier reference, by the way, for you guys. But, I am actually happy because I was always really curious on what his whole trilogy is going to be about.
Yeah, I mean it's really interesting because like I said, we have the Mandalorian that's going to be coming out soon,
right?
There's some other.
Well, there's a Cassian Andor series. Yep. Then you have the Benioff and Weiss trilogy.
Yeah, and they have. I was about to bring that up. Like they have their own.
Trilogy. They got their own trilogy. So you got to wonder, like, okay, is Ryan and those guys like talking about? Are they going to overlap in any way? Are they going to be taking place in... Because I'm pretty convinced that the Benioff and Weiss thing's going to be an Old Republic thing.
Yeah, because, I mean, with the success of Game of Thrones, I mean, this kind of fits right into
kind of their wheelhouse.
Yeah.
It just makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And Rian Johnson, I mean, if I had to guess, I would say that maybe he's going to start tackling some of the Unknown Region stuff. Because even though he's going to do his own series... I think that it's going to be something that ties in with all the other canon that Star Wars has.
Right.
I don't think it's just going to be some off in left field, but then again, you never know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still excited for Rian Johnson to do his thing. I think he's a really good director. I like the risk that he did take with The Last Jedi. I'm still one of the biggest supporters of that.
Oh, yeah.
I, too, wanted to see some more of the familiar Luke, but I did like the direction because it was so unexpected.
Well, I have to tell you, again, I try to follow and answer all of our listeners on our Twitter and on our Facebook, right? So on the Twitter side of things, trying to remember who it was. I think it's another podcaster. I had put out the question, what are your biggest expectations or greatest hopes or whatever for episode 9? And he writes back that it doesn't suck.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that Rian Johnson hatred is still a little, like, the wound's a little raw still.
Still fresh, yeah.
It's still fresh.
Yeah, it's crazy, but I think he's, I think with his own, especially if he's dealing with characters that we're not familiar with,
yeah, there's no expectations.
There's no expectations, yeah. So that way he can kind of just do his thing, and then we can truly kind of appreciate the greatness as a Star Wars community.
I'm just wondering the timeline of these things. I'm wondering when, and I'm sure Celebration is when we're going to find this stuff out, but, I'm wondering when the Benioff and Weiss trilogy is versus his. How they're going to weave in the marketing and all that with the TV series that they got going.
Right.
Because it's not just one movie. I mean, it's a whole trilogy.
And this is where it's going to get really confusing for a lot of fans, because there's going to be a lot of bouncing around, because you got like the Mandalorian that takes place after Return of the Jedi, and then you got the Cassian Andor, which happens before Rogue One, and then you got
you thought things were convoluted now?
Yeah, then you got like
just wait.
Yeah, then you got probably an Old Republic thing that happens way before anybody even thought about Star Wars. So then it's just
that's a good point.
A lot of stuff that's going on, and you can be bouncing all over the place, and especially if they keep on releasing standalone movies or films.
I know they're gonna have to release like programs before the movie starts, so you can like look in and get like some
map,
background.
This is where this takes place in the saga.
Exactly, like a little timeline or something.
You are here.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, so my next thing I wanted to ask you was, I was thinking about some of the epic battles and things that we've seen in the Star Wars films, and what's a battle or a fight that you would like to see?
Rian Johnson versus the fans.
Oh, that would be that's like a celebrity death match.
Well, but then again, the problem is it's like one against like what, millions,
right.
Thousands. I mean, I don't know. It's a good question, because I mean, now if you talk about on a planetary type of a thing, it would be interesting to see a Mustafar battle.
We kind of saw one though.
Well, kind of. I mean, but it was like a one-on-one thing, though.
Oh, you mean like an actual?
Yeah, like a whole, like, Rebel versus Empire, First Order versus, Resistance type of thing. Like, kind of like a Hoth thing, but on Mustafar.
Got you.
That would be interesting. As far as people goes, it's weird. It's like the prequels kind of took care of a lot of that.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of like, man, I always want to see the Emperor versus Yoda. That was like the big thing that everybody wanted to see.
Yeah.
And even before that, when A New Hope came out, we always like, oh, if Luke Skywalker can like battle Darth Vader. And when we got that in Empire Strikes Back, it was just like, couldn't believe it.
Yeah. I think for me, if I had to pick a planet, or I would love to see a lightsaber duel. Like, I honestly thought that I was going to get it in The Last Jedi, with Luke and Rey. Like, I would love to see them like on a mountainous kind of terrain, like almost like Jeddah, that type of, because I think it would make for a lot of good cinematography as far as like the rocks, the cliffs and overhangs. And it's just the danger of fighting all, on a big mountain.
Well, they'd have to take a lot of license though, because it's like, it wouldn't even be a fight.
I mean, just thinking about like pushing somebody off of, with a force push off a cliff, and then they're hanging on, and then, using the force to throw boulders at people. I mean, that would just be cool. Just the things that are around you, that you can use at your disposal. I think that would be just an interesting.
Well, that's why
battle.
I will tell you a battle I would have liked to have seen is a Snoke versus Luke battle.
Yeah.
That would have been interesting to me.
Hey, we might, well, I won't ruin the rest of the. We still have a little ways to go.
That's true. That's true.
But then also, I would love to see like some guys in the actual Empire like fight each other, almost like a.
So you're kind of like talking about almost like inward fighting here.
Yeah, like I would love to see like guys, because you see them arguing, within the ranks, so to speak. But I would actually love to see them like go on a mission. Excuse me, and actually like just almost do like that whole Tarkin and Vader. Like that whole scenario, but just kind of to prove your mettle, or to prove like, okay, you deserve this rank in the Empire. You have this type of tactical skill.
Tarkin versus Vader thing would have been.
Yeah, that would have been, yeah.
Like if they had just taken that
comic and
actually made a movie out of it.
Yeah, that would have been, yeah.
That'd be cool. I'd be down with that. There's actually a lot of different cool little matchups, because, you have a lot of these minor characters that in and of themselves, they could actually spin off into their own, their own movie or their own TV show or comic or novel or whatever. Like, I mean, if you start going across almost like a Battlefront type situation where you could just get, combine people from the prequels with sequels and all that. I wouldn't mind seeing, like Asajj Ventress versus Rey, maybe.
Okay, that would be a good one. Two strong women. Almost like a
Force
Ahsoka.
users. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because that's the thing, is that you can actually take people. That's one of the things that I liked about Battlefront, actually, is that you can, especially Battlefront 2, is that they basically blend all the eras. And that's kind of cool if you're doing it. But I mean, it depends. You either have to do like an in-universe, like something that actually makes sense, or, if we're talking about a battle or fight, we'd like to see just like kind of any kind of matchup.
Yeah, like, I mean, like we talked about before, like we love Rogue One because it's like in a jungle, and that was kind of a different look, and we've never seen anything like that before.
Well, is there a particular planet that we haven't seen that you'd like to see?
Well, actually, there was one. There was actually it was actually part of the Vader series, and it's basically when they went against the Mon Calamari.
Oh, yeah.
And they were like in the whole like underwater thing, and that's something we've never seen before. Like even with the Gungans, like that never took place, even though they were technically underwater too. So
yeah, it's true.
We never saw them fight underwater. We saw them fight on land.
Yeah, it's true, because with the whole Mount Calamari thing, it's kind of like you had the Empire actually had to go and do battle underwater. That was kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, as far as terrains, I do find it interesting. I can't remember. Somebody brought up, I remember I was watching some Star Wars related thing, and somebody brought up the fact that it's funny that, you have all these planets that seem to just have one type of thing. And it's kind of like, well, if you look at Earth, it's got multiple terrains. It's like, well, what if you go on the other side of Endor and it's snowy?
That's true.
Or Hoth, and it's like a swamp.
Oh, they have like other moons that circle around other planets too. So it's like it could have different ecosystems just based upon.
Oh yeah, like a whole battle, on Yavin. On Yavin 4 would be cool.
Yep.
I again would really like for them to revisit Hoth.
Yeah, that was tricky. I mean, granted, most of the battle took place either with the AT-ATs, and then of course you had like the.
It's still my favorite battle.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's
just kind of like the look of it, just the
look of it was really cool.
The whole feel of it and everything. It's, maybe it's been the weather that we've been having lately. I don't know. Maybe
it'd been cool to actually see stormtroopers in there though, like actually like on the ground.
Well, that we kind of, and you got that a little bit toward the end when they were storming the base,
right?
Because that's when you saw the snowtroopers for the first time and everything. And it would just be cool to see more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think that, like you said, there's a lot of matchups that you can do, and it has to make sense, of course, in the universe. That's the biggest thing.
Well, you can or you can't. I mean, the beautiful part to me about Star Wars is it's so rich in, everything, locations, characters, all this stuff that even the governmental systems and the armies or whatever. It's like there's so much depth there that it's like you can literally get into this kind of a conversation because there's a lot of different things. And, according to storyline and stuff like that, it might not necessarily be a practical thing to do, but that would be.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest things that we always like whenever there's a new saga film, we're always trying to figure, okay, well, where are they shooting?
Yeah.
Because that location is just like, okay, they're over in Ireland and they're here.
Right. It's like, is that Tatooine?
Yeah, is this going to be, okay, this, when we found out about The Force Awakens, like, okay, Jakku was almost like another Tatooine-like planet.
Yeah,
so
we all thought it was Tatooine.
Exactly. Like when we first saw that Star Destroyer like in the sand, we're just like, dude, they tore Tatooine up.
What happened to Tatooine? But then it's like it wasn't Tatooine.
Right.
Well, what about you guys? What kind of battle or fight would you guys like to see? Don't forget to hit us up at @HeadToHeadSW on Facebook or Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you guys think. All right, what do we got next?
So next, man, look, so I told you before that I have a friend of mine and I'm stepping her through the Star Wars universe. So,
yeah, I remember you were talking about that.
So now we're up to episode 4, New Hope. Right.
Oh, so you got into the prequels.
So you got it through the prequels, Rogue One.
So you've actually been showing it in ultra chronological order.
Yep, I went from episode 1 all the way through Rogue One. I skipped Solo, and I just went straight to A New Hope. So here's the thing. And she asked a question like, okay, did Vader actually kill Obi Wan, or did he like?
No, he totally disappeared.
Yeah, did he just totally disappear?
Because actually, one of the things that's interesting about that was a lot of us thought that, especially before even Empire Strikes Back came out, we thought that's what a lightsaber did to you, was it vaporized you.
Right.
So. You can imagine you go see episode 1 and like Qui-Gon gets stabbed and run through or whatever. And it's like, oh, well, I guess they don't just disappear. And then you find out later that was part of Obi-Wan's plan. And that's what he was talking about when he said, I'll become more powerful than you can imagine. So yeah, I think it is the exact same thing. I think Luke just ended up it's almost like you're becoming one with the Force, basically. Like you're giving up
your spirit.
Yeah, your spirit to the Force, and just, because, if you look at it, Yoda did the same thing. He was just basically like, okay, time to go.
Yeah, he was sick.
And he just disappeared. He didn't just die. But if you look at Qui-Gon, he just died.
Right.
Because he was the first guy to, discover how to even become a Force ghost.
Right, and that was the whole thing, because, much like you, I thought the same thing. I thought, that's just what happens when you get hit with a lightsaber.
Oh, sure. That makes sense. Thing is like this big beam of energy.
Right. So my whole thing is like, okay, because at first I thought it might have been just a limitation of the technology in the 70s. Like, okay, well, maybe he wanted to do something and that's all he could do, because it did look like he didn't even touch him. It's like it's almost like a swing and a miss. Like Vader swung it and then Obi-Wan almost like dropped right.
Yeah, but you
before.
could tell that it wasn't really that too, because Vader was confused. He's all stepping on the rope like, hey, what's up with this?
Exactly. And
where'd he go? Is there like a door under there? Did we put something in there? Did I not see this in the design?
Right. So when Luke did it, in the Last Jedi, once again, he kind of just gave himself away to the Force, and that always brought up that question of like, okay, well, is that what Obi Wan really did in episode 4?
Well, I think he did. I just think it was a different thing. Like, because with Luke, I think that a lot of it, this is where it gets a little strange, and we're probably going to have to wait till we get some more answers in 9, because it's kind of like, did Luke give himself up to the Force because he knew he was dying because it was so strenuous, to pull off that incredible Force power?
Right.
Right? Or did he willingly go, okay, it's almost like an Obi Wan thing to where I could do more good in the Force Ghost spiritual realm than I can here as a physical being.
Right, because people always it's kind of the conversation we had on the other podcast.
Sure, when we were talking about Force Ghosts.
Yeah, and it's just like
coming up a lot lately, and I think that's because everybody's, getting ready for 9.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things where you have to, ask the question like, okay, is with Luke's presence always being around, like he's always going to be the go-to guy. Like everybody's going to be looking for Luke to pull their butts out the fire. Yep. And, it's time for someone else to kind of take over for him. And now that person is right, and he can be the guide, and he can be, the person who can like, all right, when you need me, I'll be there type thing. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where I did have to look, because I always did wonder like why Vader did step on it, like, but Vader,
you could tell he was confused.
Yeah, like, okay, I've never seen this before, and he was trying to make sure like he was going on, he didn't do some weird trick,
right? Because don't forget that I doubt, Qui-Gon being the first person to be able to do it, and then he teaches Yoda, and then
Yoda taught Obi Wan,
right? Yoda teaches Obi Wan, and then. Basically, I'm sure somehow Luke probably read about it or whatever, but the thing is, Palpatine probably knew nothing about it. How would he know? So how would Vader know?
Yeah, and then there's also one, you kind of have to ask yourself, all right, well, if Vader didn't know about it, and then Obi-Wan pulls his trick, because we never really saw, or actually we didn't have the explanation until Revenge of the Sith, when he told him about the whole Force Ghost thing. It's like, okay, more training I have for you. And so now that explains why Obi-Wan was able to do it, because before we had no explanation for it. Yeah. It just happened, and
you would almost assume that that's just what happened to every Jedi when they died.
Yeah, exactly. You just turn into a ghost.
You didn't know that it was some skill that you had to learn. You just figured, okay, yeah, I guess that's what happens when you're a good guy and you pass on.
Exactly.
Because the interesting thing is, the Sith don't really know about it, but they kind of have their own weird little version too. Now, kind of goes back to our old buddy Exar Kun. The big thing, I'm trying to remember what book it was. It was one of the bigger Legends novels. It might have even been the Zahn trilogy. Maybe. Like Dark Force Rising or something. Or it could have been another book. But basically, Exar Kun was like haunting the base on Yavin 4. So when Luke went and established his Jedi temple there, Exar Kun started like tempt him and screw with his head and all that. And it was this whole big subplot. So it's kind of like, well, Exar Kun's been dead for a while, but he's kind of like this Sith spirit. So obviously if the current canon actually borrows anything from that, you have to figure that maybe the Sith have their own version of a Force ghost.
Yeah, and I also do wonder, like, when we find places that are quote-unquote rich with the dark side of the Force, like in The Last Jedi, that little hole or the cave from Empire, like, is that, the Empire? And I've heard that the Sith are actually, they preserve their essence, like, in things. Like, they can preserve it in, like, holocrons, they can preserve themselves.
Almost like they're possessing something.
Yeah, almost like we have some weird Chucky.
And then, the other thing, too, is that, of course, the Sith aren't the only dark side users, so it's kind of like...
True.
I mean, that's where I wonder if they're going to actually start to try to get more into the lore of Force ghosts, Sith spirits, how this whole thing works.
Hopefully that's what Rian Johnson's working on.
Maybe.
Or at least the gentleman from Game of Thrones. That would be cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, well, I don't know, because it's like we don't really... If Benioff and Weiss actually do the Old Republic thing, I don't think... Unless it was a lost art and Qui-Gon rediscovered it. Like maybe generations ago, they all knew how to do it. Mm-hmm. But then you'd think that somebody would have popped up somewhere. See, this is where it gets kind of weird.
Yeah, because you almost have to wonder, like, well, how did Qui-Gon even...
Right. It's not like he could practice.
Yeah, exactly. And then...
Maybe he walk around, all right, stab me again.
Cut me, Mick. But the other thing, too, is it's like, all right, well, if he found that, let's say he found some old ancient Jedi.
Yeah, like text, he would have had to.
Well, my thing is like, well, why didn't you bring that before the council? Like, and let them look at it before you die. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, because you got to wonder, like, when he was stabbed by Maul, did he go, awesome, now I can try this?
Right.
Or like, oh, I'm about to die. Maybe I should try that thing I was reading about the other day in that text. How'd that go again?
Exactly. And that's what I mean, like...
Yeah, they're going to have to...
Yeah, how did he get that knowledge in the first place? And then why wouldn't you automatically just tell...
The only thing I can think of, though, is that maybe...
Yoda and them.
Well, it could be, like, maybe they lived on as an entity, but he somehow figured out how to manifest that into a form, a spirit form that kind of looked like him. That's possible, too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like, it's like a one and done, like, well, you better get it right or you're just lost forever kind of thing. Maybe but even then, it's like, well, how did he figure that out?
Or maybe he just stumbled upon it, like, oh, okay, now that you're one with the Force, so many things and he just went for something and, hey, cool.
Well, it's kind of like that whole thing in Rebels, right? The whole world between worlds concept. I mean, I think with Palpatine especially, I think they're really setting some things up in 9. And they're using all these other things. So it's going to be really interesting. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Give us your thoughts. Write us at head-to-head-SW. And, let us know what you think on our Facebook or on our Twitter. We really want to get you guys' opinion. So it looks like we better finish up that drink and get going.
Get going.
I mean, it's like, look, yeah, those guys go to the cantina. They're talking about Force ghosts, spirits. And...
Well, that's how they did it. That's probably how they started. They were probably drunk at the cantina.
Hold my beer.
Watch me. It's like a beer. Just like a party trick.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, he disappeared.
It's like, check it out. Watch this. All right, so what do we got next?
Well, next we have Duel of the Fates. All right, so this week for Duel of the Fates, we have who is better to direct Star Wars, Rian Johnson or J.J. Abrams?
Yeah, 2 words. Well, 2 titles. Force Awakens, Last Jedi. It's kind of like, it really depends on what you're looking for out of Star Wars, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for the more traditional, let's carry on Lucas's tradition a little bit. Obviously, J.J. Abrams. We can't really truly say that, though, until 9, because...
Right.
I mean, who knows? Rian Johnson, on the other hand, I think was really good for Star Wars because he dared to do something a little different. Admittedly, not everything he did worked, but it did take Star Wars in a different place, which is what all the fans were clamoring for. Like, quit giving us the same old thing. Take it somewhere new. So you get a guy that takes it somewhere new... Oh, we don't like that. And again, I mean, as much as I know you and I love The Last Jedi, both of us will readily admit it's not a perfect movie by any stretch.
Oh, absolutely.
In fact, I remember we left the theater and, instead of like going, oh man, wasn't that, we're kind of like, we were silent.
Yeah, we kind of like, we had to process it.
Yeah, we had to process it. And, it was kind of like one of those things where you're almost like afraid to get the other, because you didn't want to hear somebody say, I didn't really like that.
Yeah, you don't ever want to say that Star Wars movies suck. Like,
yeah. And I can understand where some, fans are kind of like, these guys are just so They want Star Wars to be good. They can't admit when something's bad. But happily, I think there was a lot of things that The Last Jedi got right. So I think that Rian Johnson actually is a good director for Star Wars. Now, you could make the argument that he would have been a better guy for a standalone film than a saga film.
Okay.
You know, or maybe like a episode of the TV show or, you know, something like that. Because you got to remember that there's even though people want Star Wars to go somewhere different, you still have parameters. You still have some rules. You have this, you know, like these boundaries in essence that George Lucas created, and you need to kind of color between the lines, so to speak.
Right.
And sometimes it's a fine line, I think. And it takes a special kind of director who really gets it to know what to do. Thing is, though, is that Rian Johnson was a huge fan of Star Wars all his life, so I don't know.
So you going with Ryan?
No, I'm going with JJ.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because, again, it's kind of depends on what you want. Well, I like my Star Wars to be along the traditional, follow the rules,
Right.
work within those parameters kind of a guy. But that's not to say, if we're talking about the saga films,
Okay.
you know, but JJ's great. You know, admittedly, the only Rian Johnson film I've seen is The Last Jedi. I know he did Looper. I've heard it's amazing. You know, there's a couple other movies that he did that a lot of people are, you know, that's why actually everybody was totally excited that he was doing the Star Wars film in the first place.
Because they wanted something dark.
Yeah, because they thought, oh, this guy is they're going for the typical, the second movie in the trilogy is where everybody's in peril, and it's, you know, the hero's journey starts out where you meet everybody, then things get a little bit dark and crazy, and then it resolves in the end. Well, everybody was like, hey, Rian Johnson is the perfect guy for the second chapter of the trilogy. And I think that, like I said, if he had given them the Luke Skywalker that they wanted, I think it would have been okay. I think people would have let the other stuff go. But the fact is, he didn't. So you just have this situation where everybody turns on him. Because I think it was a little too different. And the other problem I think that people had, and, you know, I think we went over this a lot in our Last Jedi review. If you guys, you know, if you've never heard it, on one of our earlier podcasts, we actually did do a Last Jedi review. Be sure to check that out. But I think that overall, JJ, if you look at all the movies that he's done, if you look at his TV shows, he's a really good choice. I, for one, was really happy when Colin Trevorrow was dismissed and they chose J.J. Abrams to do 9. Because it's like, okay, cool.
I really would love to know like what Colin's vision would have been.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, I'd like to see the Lord Miller version of Solo, you know? Because they actually kept a lot of stuff. I went back and I read something where they told what scenes were the Lord and Miller scenes that were essentially untouched that were in the movie, and those are some of the cooler scenes. I don't think what they were going for was that total slapstick type of thing that a lot of people feared. So I think that it actually would have been a really interesting movie. And so, you know, consequently, I agree. I would like to at least, you know, would love to go into an alternate universe and see, you know, like what's the Colin Trevorrow episode 9? Of course, right now I'd like to see the J.J. Abrams episode 9.
Well, yeah. I think for me, JJ would be the better director. It's weird though because, like, on one, like, almost, I want JJ to be the physical director, but I almost want Ryan to be the story writer. I kind of like.
I want George Lucas to be the story writer.
I mean, I like the fact that Ryan took risk, but I think JJ's style of directing, in a sense of like the cinematography and because there was a lot of cool shots in The Force Awakens. There were a lot of things.
Yeah, but weren't you bothered at all though by the fact that there was a lot of things that JJ established and that Ryan just either ignored or completely?
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I think that, and even though they did work together, I mean, that's what's weird because
I know that is
because it's like they worked together.
Well, yeah, everybody forgets that JJ executive produced 8.
Yeah, and it's just like, but he had to kind of give over the reins to Ryan to actually tell his story. Mm-hmm. So he couldn't really interfere. Like, he's kind of like that whole Obi Wan thing. Like, if you choose to go there, I can't interfere. Especially since it's Empire. So
exactly.
It's kind of like, I really wish that JJ really brought us some cool characters. And I love that. But then I think Brian expounded on some of those characters in a different way. That was really cool. Mm-hmm. Like the whole Poe Dameron thing. I love that. I really loved, of course, like what he did with Luke in the sense of kind of making him that.
And I know how much you love DJ.
See, that's one of those characters that we could have done
misstep,
with.
Right?
Yeah, that was like almost like it's not quite Jar Jar level, but
no DJ standalone film.
No,
for you. You know that he did have his own comic though.
I mean, he'd be better off just being an actual DJ. But yeah, I think that Ryan is really creative, and I think he can create that element of darkness, especially like I love the whole aspect or concept of Snoke melding the minds of Rey and Kylo together.
Yeah, there were definitely
I love that idea.
There were some great choices that he made, and I thought that the way that he directed those scenes, was really like he kind of had you just like focused on that and paying attention, like
especially like when she's like shooting and Kylo thought he was shot, and like how real that was for them, and
exactly.
they could see each other, but they couldn't see the space that they were in, and like they were just like, okay, well, how did this happen? Like what is the Force trying to tell us? And they were kind of going through this whole thing, and then the fact that Snoke kind of orchestrated all of this. Well, I thought that was really cool. And that was like a different twist as far as Force powers and things of that nature. So
yeah, but then the problem is, of course, is that he turns around and doesn't give you any explanation to who Snoke is.
Yeah.
And then kills him off. I mean.
Yeah, and I think that's where JJ would have been like, well, let's, and.
Well, I would have just liked to have known what we'll probably find out, I'm sure. But I mean, the thing is that it's one of those things where, again, he took a lot of risks. Mm-hmm. A lot of them worked and some of them didn't. But ultimately, I guess it comes down to, if we're going to compare these two directors, and of course, one of the ground rules that we laid out before this show was we're going to stick to the Star Wars universe. We're not going to compare them as directors with their other films, actually compare them as directors. It's really more like, who's the better director for Star Wars?
Right.
So here's the question. This is how we could settle this very easily. Is that, who would you rather see make another saga film?
True.
And
that would be JJ.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that kind of answers, I mean, when you're really being honest, because we could sit here and defend Rian Johnson's choices and all that, but when it comes down to it, it's like, if you found out that he was making episode 10 or something, you'd be like, ooh, hope it doesn't suck.
Right. That is true.
Because I have to admit, it's so weird how I feel about The Last Jedi, man. It's like, on one hand, I mean, I absolutely love the snot out of that movie. I really do. I think it's like, I was just like, oh, I can't believe what a great choice this was. And I remember watching that. But I remember simultaneously being completely let down by a lot of things. Like,
they were a lot of...
Oh, I don't like this.
Yeah.
And it's I've never actually, or at least it's been a long time since I watched a movie where I loved and hated on equal levels certain parts, and it's like, I think that's one of the reasons why I was kind of rendered silent.
You know what?
When we left.
Rian Johnson is a genius. And I'm going to tell you why. He made us feel conflicted just like Kylo.
That's right. That's right.
You don't know which side to go on, like the light side or the dark. Like, okay.
And it turns out that whole line that Kylo said about we got to let the past die was actually a memo to Lucasfilm from Rian. It wasn't even supposed to be in the movie.
Yes, you got to let George die.
Yeah, it's like because you can almost say that really sums up his vision in a lot of ways. And it's funny because what was happening from a movie making perspective was also happening in the script, where you have to say, okay, we're going to, let the past die, forge onto this new path. And that's essentially what the whole thing was about. So, I mean, it was kind of interesting. So I think, it's another one of those softer Duel of the Fates where we agree. Yeah.
Well, guys, what do you think? Who's your favorite between the two, Rian Johnson or J.J. Abrams? Let us know what you think, and make sure you leave your comments in the comment section below. Hit us up.
Be nice. Hit us up. Don't hit us.
Right. Oh, man, I don't know why that made me laugh.
Jokes are strong with this one.
I don't know why that made me laugh so hard.
So that's what it is, man. It's a good time when we're talking about Star Wars. This is why people listen to this show. It's why we got to keep it.
Yeah, we got to have fun.
We got to be us.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to need to go back to the Cantina. But, yeah. So what do we have next? Let's see.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting from a certain point of view.
Yes, from a certain point of view. So we have Snoke Lives. Is he dead? The rumors say no. So I was doing some reading, and
Snoke is Plagueis. Sorry, it's that Star Wars Tourette's
right.
I have.
So I was doing some reading, and a lot of people were saying that, and there are a lot of rumors in the movie universe saying that Snoke isn't dead.
That back again?
Yeah, well, you know what? Here's my thing. I always thought that there was something up with that shot that they did. And in The Last Jedi, I think it was right after Holdo slammed her ship into Snoke's flagship or whatnot. And it was a shot where they kind of zoomed in on Snoke's body. And it was kind of held there for a second, almost as if like we were going to see him like pull himself back together or something crazy. And that's what I remember seeing in the theater, like, oh crap, like he's not dead.
If they had done that, if Snoke had actually just like kind of just stuck himself back together, that would have just been like, I would have been like freaking out. But you know what? It's like I said, look, here's what I'm going to say about this. Or at least this is what I'm going to say first about this. If Darth Maul can come back, anything can happen. I'm down with anything. If you can bring Darth Maul, the guy was like cut in half, like Snoke.
True.
But then he fell down a shaft.
True.
Both parts of him.
Mm-hmm.
So if he can come back in the Star Wars universe, then...
And this stands to reason, I guess, that Snoke probably is more powerful than Darth Maul.
I was going to say, if anybody could come back from something like that, it would be Snoke. Because remember, we don't know who he is.
True. But the only problem I have with this, it's kind of like that whole Han Solo thing. Like, oh, is Han Solo dead? Yes. Because not only was he stabbed, he doesn't have any force powers to sustain his life or anything, but he was stabbed and then he fell off that huge bridge. And then on top of that, the whole thing blew up. So my thing is, Snoke's ship actually blew up. So I don't really see him coming back from that. But I don't know. I mean,
it's kind of like all the rumors of Palpatine being alive too. It's one of those things where you can see a way that they might be able to make these things happen. I mean, if you look at all the characters that have had somewhat of a demise, and I say somewhat because some were a little bit more cut and dry than others. Like, for instance, I think that it's very plausible to bring Mace back.
Right, because we don't know what actually happened.
All they did was cut off, I mean, I say that like it's no big deal, but I mean, all they did was cut off his hands and he flew out. Now, before everybody jumps on the fact that, yes, he did fall down the city of Coruscant, but hey, so did Anakin and Obi Wan like 500,000 times in episode 2, and they just kind of use the Force to, guide themselves or whatever. It's very plausible, as powerful as Mace is or was, that he could easily have survived that.
True.
Easily. Now, you go to Snoke, though. My man was cut in half, and then he had a ship run into his ship and pretty much vaporize it.
Yeah.
Thanks to, it wasn't just ramming speed, it was like hyperspace.
Yeah.
Straight through.
Yep.
But on the other hand, again, we don't know. Is Snoke like an energy-based entity that can you know what I mean? Where it's kind of like what we see maybe isn't his real essence. Well, that's sounding new agey, huh?
I know, right?
I should bring up the...
you did some hookah in that cantina, man.
I should bring up the clear your mind music while I'm, saying all this stuff.
Yeah, you're clearing your mind, all right.
Snoke is alive.
Got that smoking those death sticks again, man. But,
yeah, well, it's a habit.
But I think that, well, let me ask you this. Do you think that and I know the typical answer is going to be if it serves the story. But honestly, like, for real, man. Like,
you're not going to let me have that.
No,
one,
I'm
huh?
not. Like, would that be cheesy for Star Wars? Do you think that would be cheesy?
I mean, you can't limit. Look, there's a lot of cheesy things that happen in Star Wars. I mean, can't little thing like some cheese stop you from...
Yeah, but I mean, like, okay, the guys couldn't have, like, his ship. Now, granted, Rey and Kylo were still on part of the ship, after that happened. Because that's when Kylo gave his whole speech and everything. And they both were fighting over the lightsaber that kind of eventually split in half. Mm-hmm. But my thing is, if they brought back Snoke, like, would that really be good for the Star? I mean, like, if you brought in Episode 9, like, okay, would that really make sense? Like, would it really be something like, oh boy, it's like, want like a whole Jason Voorhees thing, or, it just wouldn't, to me.
Well, it's funny because it's funny you bring that up because, one of the YouTube channels I love to watch is CinemaSins.
Mm-hmm.
So they did everything wrong with Friday the 13th Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I highly recommend it if you guys haven't seen it. I mean, it's just, the points that they bring up are just so legitimately accurate. It's like, when you really stop and think about these things, you're like, that's totally true.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the same thing here where, yeah, I get that, where it's kind of like, okay, at what point do you just have to go, we made a decision, we got to follow through. As much as fans would like to see it, as much as we'd like to do it. But at the same time, once again, as far as would it serve the story, I don't know, because I don't know the story yet.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe it would. What if you do a thing where Snoke is actually Plagueis and he's taken on multiple forms throughout the whole thing? Another scenario I can throw out there. If he is this dark force from the unknown regions that Palpatine was obsessed with, well, who knows what powers those guys have? Because Thrawn even said in the first Thrawn novel, like, there's some stuff out there that you have no idea. Like, you have no idea what you guys are really facing. Like, there's some really terrifying, crazy stuff in the unknown regions. So their physics might not even work the same as ours. You know what I mean? It's like...
True.
There could be, like, a whole lot of... I don't want to call them outs, but,
Yeah.
There's ways they could bring Snoke back that would actually make sense with the story.
And that's why I was going to bring up, like, the whole Exar Kun thing. Like,
I mean, would it be cheesy? Yeah, probably. I mean, it could be, but again, and a lot of it, honestly, it depends on how they handle it. Mm-hmm. Because it's just one of those things that I think that if they handle it in a way that explained it well enough and plausible enough, you could actually maybe bypass some of the cheesiness of it. Because if you think about it, like at first when I don't know about you, because you watched Clone Wars later than I did.
Yeah, I finished it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, when you got to the part where, Maul comes out with his spider mechanical legs or whatever, didn't a part of you go, really, dude?
Yeah.
But you know what? By the time Rebels comes along and Maul's in that, you're totally down with it. You know, it's like it's not cheesy anymore. And in fact, it makes some very good stories.
Well, yeah, and I think all this, for whatever reason, I think everybody in the Star Wars universe just fell in love with Maul anyway. Like, we all kind of wanted him to be around. But Snoke is kind of like, I mean, he didn't have that same flair that Maul had, at least not from what I've heard. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Snoke is cool and he's interesting. And I think if we would have, even though we didn't know much about Maul either, besides the fact that he was just a Sith Lord that was, one of Palpatine's.
Let's face it, everybody liked him because he looked cool and he jumped around with a double-bladed lightsaber.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what everybody kind of fell in love with. And it was like the first time you really saw, like, okay,
an
that's
acrobatic lightsaber
duel. Yeah, exactly. So that's what everybody was just like, whoa. So,
well, honestly, I mean, when you go back to the Phantom Menace, that was one of the things that I do remember being blown away by was all the different cool lightsaber stuff you saw. Especially that first scene when first like they shoved the lightsaber through the door.
Oh yeah, and then
it was kind of like they shut the blast door, and then Qui-Gon's like, okay, and he just shoves it in even deeper, and it's like all melting. I remember just like losing my mind when I saw that scene. Like, that's what I'm talking about. I want to see what lightsabers can actually do. I want to see the wanton destruction that these things can cause. Because you get glimpses of that in the original trilogy, but it isn't until the prequels that you're like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I think Snoke can still have that moment, though.
Okay.
Again, it just depends on what he is and what he's doing.
I mean, you bring up a very, very good point.
I usually do.
Yeah, all right.
Just saying.
Shut up. But
Snoke is Plagueis. I'm such
it's like
dork.
A parrot.
I'm a dork sometimes, I admit it.
But
right?
Snoke is Plagueis. But I think you could be onto something with the whole Outer Rim thing because you are absolutely correct.
Good.
That
before you were saying I'm on something. Now you're saying I'm on to something. I like that better.
Well, I'm stepping you down. You're completing one level of the program.
All right.
But
go on.
I think that's a valid point because Thrawn is, and that's why one of the reasons why Palpatine hired Thrawn. Or he wanted him close, and
here's the thing.
He wanted him to explore the whole unknown regions for him.
And if you actually read the books, Palpatine was scared. Like, he was actually freaked out by what he was feeling coming from there. So, I mean, what scares him?
True, especially when he feels like I'm
first of all, he thinks he's the be-all, end-all
like
anyway.
I'm a god, basically.
Yeah.
It's a god complex.
Exactly. So you got something that's freaking Palpatine out, you know something's up.
True.
And if you really look at, because that's one of the things that I thought was interesting, both in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, because you basically see a couple of things. Like, you see Force powers in there that are kind of like the next generation to what we've seen before. Like when Kylo stops the blaster bolt midair.
Mm-hmm.
And then, a lot of Snoke, him, the way he'd throw people around, just the aggression of it and what he was able to do to Rey and just cause pain with all this like mental,
telepathy, basically.
Yeah, basically invading your mind in a very aggressive way. I mean,
even that whole, still like one of the funniest.
Or just slamming Hux, man.
Oh man, the funniest thing is when he just took that lightsaber and smacked Rey in the head with it. I was dying laughing.
That was awesome. That actually showed the sense of humor. See, that was one of those moments that I thought, now that's cool because that's something you didn't always see Palpatine do. Although
he could have, but it's just.
Well, Palpatine did kind of have a sense of humor at times, though.
But yeah, I thought that was really hilarious when he
He's
just
like doing that. And this guy circles around and smacks her in the head. That was awesome.
Like, stupid little girl. Yeah, so I thought that was really, cool. But yeah, I think, and you almost have to kind of wonder, like, and that's the whole gist of a lot of things I've been reading, is that Snoke is really an apprentice, not the master.
Yeah, it could be.
And I think we're going to find out possibly in episode 9 who the actual master really is.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people that say Palpatine. There's people, there's all kinds of speculation on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, right. It's almost like a repeat of the Phantom Menace. Yeah, but the question is, which one was the apprentice? Which one's the master? Who did we kill?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess we'll have to kind of find out. But I'm still on the fence with Snoke. Because then I feel like if you bring him back, then either he has to be the ultimate bad guy, or if you have someone else planned as to being the ultimate bad guy, and then now you got like 2 people you got to contend with, possibly 3 if Kylo stays dark.
Right. And to ultimately answer your question too, I wouldn't necessarily be against it if he came back, but it would definitely have to serve the story more, and it would really have to serve it would have to serve a good story.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's kind of like you had said, it's kind of like, well, if you do this, you better be sure.
Yeah.
As Jack Nicholson said in Batman. It's one of those things that you can't mess that up.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Is he alive? Is he dead? Do you even care? Let us know. Whatever it is, we want to hear from you guys. Because here's the thing. I'll hear, and I'm sure some of the people that listen to our show, again, our audience is growing. That's great. So each one of us have a core of our friends that have actually watched the show, which is awesome. And then we have a lot of people like Patrick that we mentioned and other people that don't know us at all and just found our podcast and, they really enjoy listening to us. But what's funny is, like, a lot of my friends will listen and they'll stop me in the bowling alley, or they'll stop me, wherever they see me, and they'll ask me all these questions. Ask them on Twitter and Facebook.
Yes.
That's where we would hey, I'll continue to discuss it with you because I just appreciate the fact you guys are listening. But ask them on Facebook and Twitter. Involve the community. YouTube.
Yeah, there's other people who may actually have more insight to your actual question. Like, I know you're asking us specifically.
They might know more than us.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They may know more than us. So, and it also makes for great conversation and debate about things, and people can bring up, points that others have not considered. So, yeah.
Yep.
Definitely do that.
One day we'll even be back on video. But hey, we still have it on the YouTube channel. So you can go to the Eric Vansel Media YouTube channel, and you could still, you can watch the title card, but you can still listen to us. All right. Oh, next it's one of my favorite segments. Thank you. Couldn't even think of the word. I'm like, how many times can I say favorite before I actually think about it? But it's a little segment that we call Clear Your Mind. All right. So this is where we take your questions that you have submitted. So who's first?
All right. First question comes from Jamila Dobbins. Her question is, why doesn't Vader ever feel in the Force that Leia is his daughter? He felt Luke in the Force.
Well, here's the thing. There's a couple of reasons. Number one, when you had the last name of Skywalker.
Kind of raises some eyebrows.
Yeah, it's like, but this is a question that does come up every once in a while among the Star Wars fans.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a question that I've seen on other Star Wars themed shows that, once a show gets going long enough, this is one that pops up. Because it seems like it's a plot hole, but it really isn't. Yeah,
and plus, for people who are, casual fans who are just getting into it, sure, they're going to have that question.
Yeah. It's one of those, once you get to a certain point in Star Wars, there's first certain surface questions pop up, like who's that guy and who's that, why are they doing? But then once you get a little bit deeper into it, you start thinking about it. It's one of the biggest questions that always comes up.
Always.
Usually right after, if they're trying to hide Luke, why did they not change his last name? But I think we actually answered that one. But the reason actually is quite simple. It's because, first of all, I mean, it's simple, but it's not. Because I understand the criticism comes from the fact, like, look, she was, like, right in his proximity.
He was holding on to her.
Holding on to her.
Right in front of target.
Like, Vader senses Luke
in an X-Wing.
Like, probably, some number of miles ahead of him or whatever. But he's got Leia, like, right up against him, and he's got nothing. But that's because he wasn't necessarily reaching out in the Force for her, because he didn't even know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he might have sensed some familiarity or whatever, but it's like he wouldn't have necessarily, it was almost like it was masked. The only reason why he sensed Luke in the Force, if everybody remembers, is because Luke was using the Force at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Leia had no training. I mean, she kind of had the Force in the way that Anakin had it when he was a real little kid, or Luke did when he was blasting womp rats, or whatever. It's kind of like it was almost like enhanced reflexes, but it wasn't like you were consciously tapping into this power.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't consciously tapping into any power. Luke was.
Well, you could make the argument, though, that when he sensed Obi Wan.
But that's because Obi Wan's always like emitting some sort of forceness. Because you got to remember that Obi Wan was also actively seeking out Vader, and he was probably trying to sense him. And for all we know, he was even trying to call him. Because if you look at the way that Obi Wan was kind of poking around the Death Star and stuff, he was obviously
trying to figure out where Vader was.
He was like trying to reach out and figure out where he was and sense his presence and go to that. That's why he was able to. That's why, if you remember, Vader was waiting for him because he knew where he was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Obi-Wan kind of rounds the corner, and there's Vader with his lightsaber out. Yep. and it just took a nastier turn.
We're not going
Clear
there.
your mind. Clear your mind.
We're not going there. But
it's like juvenile sometimes.
I know, but whatever. Well, part of the reason, too, is that, and I think that he wasn't even expecting her to be alive. I mean, because
he didn't even know
that he had a daughter.
Nope. Because he didn't know they were twins.
He didn't even know first of all, he didn't even know the sex of this kid because, she allegedly the baby, so he thought, died. But he didn't even know there were two, and let alone were still alive. So
see, a better question.
He wouldn't even thought about that.
Well, and that's the thing. Now, if she actually had some Force abilities or whatever, it would have made more sense to ask the question. See, this is when you get to the advanced level of Star Wars. This question would make more sense framed like, why didn't he sense that she even had the Force? You know what I mean? It's like, forget the family relationship that he's his daughter. How would he even... Well, you would think that it would you would think that it would, the presence of something familiar to you, and then on top of that, like the fact that, okay, theoretically, she looked like Padme. So looking at Leia, it's like, okay, she kind of looks like Padme. Well, there's probably a lot of chicks that look like Padme out there in the Star Wars universe, though.
But the fact that she looked like Padme, she was in the political arena. I mean, there's a lot of...
I know, there's some similarities. There's kind of like, hey, man, familiar?
Yeah. And then on top of that, and Leia being as... Because it's not like she wasn't... It's not, how like they'll have like in Rush Hour, like, oh, this is the consulate's daughter, we're just going to snatch her or something like that. Like, no, she was a big political force. So
yeah, but remember, she was known as Bale's daughter, though.
Right.
So even then, it's kind of like, and then, you know,
probably wouldn't necessarily think, and that's what I'm saying. Like
the light side of the Force is also being somewhat masked by Yoda.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
Here's the bottom line, just so you guys all understand something, okay? The real reason...
It's because George didn't want it.
...is because George didn't have that family connection in A New Hope.
True.
And Leia wasn't even the sister until Return of the Jedi, actually. Because even in... See, first of all, because this was actually a story not too long ago, too. It's something that we already knew, but it was some officially released thing that where they got a hold of the original script of Empire Strikes Back, and it really was that Darth Vader killed Anakin Skywalker. Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons why Obi Wan in A New Hope says only a master of evil, Darth, because Darth was his actual first name. Like, all this other stuff didn't come up until later on. So at the time that a lot of these things are going on, Lucas never really did that. It wasn't until later that he kind of put that whole spin on things. Well, that created a few continuity problems. This question is one of those. So what you have to do, and Lucas is really good at this, by the way, what you have to do is you have to come up with an in-universe answer for an out-of-universe issue.
Mm-hmm.
And Lucas actually, I believe, addressed this in the commentary of the original trilogy that he did.
But it does kind of make you beg to wonder, or beg to ask a question, though. Because you said she didn't technically become... I mean, we didn't know officially until Return of the Jedi. But in Empire, when Luke called out to, like, why did he call out to Leia?
Well, because it was one of those things that it was, remember, they were supposed to be in love kind of thing. Like, he had a thing for her. That's why when she kissed him in Empire, he was all like, oh, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah. But...
Well, at the end, when he was despondent, you know, she's the one that was always comforting him. When Obi Wan died, she was the one that comforted him. Mm-hmm. You know, taking care of him. She was the one that was kind of like kissing his forehead and being all, you know, sisterly. But, you know, Luke was just this, like, 19, 20-year-old, 21-year-old kid at the time, and he just, you know, he kind of had a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I just
So that's why he reached out. Now, the better question would be when she sensed him.
Yeah, it's
you
like...
know, there's that. But see, by then, Vader wasn't even...
Well, yeah, he was on to something else.
Yeah.
But...
he was busy choking out, you know, his officers or whatever.
Well, yeah.
Plus, he was obsessed with Luke. He was really obsessed with Luke. And I think that a lot of times, you know, again, the Force isn't like some sort of an alarm clock that every time you get near somebody, it just like goes off like some sort of smoke detector. I mean, it's like sometimes you have to reach out and you have to probe and, you know, stuff like that. So...
that's not how the Force works.
But, you know, there's other in universe explanations that you can come up with that I've actually heard, you know, that because Yoda was now, and this, Lucas actually confirmed this, that Yoda was clouding the dark side, and that was sort of like a spin when Palpatine was clouding the light side during the prequels. During the original trilogy, Yoda was now clouding the dark side of the Force. That's the whole reason why, you know, when Darth Vader sensed Luke on Endor, you know, and the Emperor was like, well, I
haven't felt anything.
I haven't felt anything, so you're probably wrong. Mm-hmm. Well, he wouldn't have felt it either, except the fact that it was his son, so he knew. Mm-hmm. You know.
Well.
But that's a good question. Welcome to the Star Wars 101 level of watching these things. Now you can be confused like the rest of us. In a couple of years, you'll be the one going, well, the reason is probably because...
Right.
All right, what do we got next?
All right, next we have a question from Sharif Simmons. His question is another Leia question.
All these Leia questions today.
If they kill Leia off in Episode 9, do you think they would make her a Force ghost at the end of the movie like they did with Return of the Jedi? So basically, if they kill her off in the movie,
yeah, I get that. Would they actually make like a Carrie Fisher Force ghost? Sure,
it would be cool.
I mean, I think so. Why not?
I mean,
they got the footage. All they got to do is have her standing there and just kind of have it loop to where she's sort of looking around.
They do is have R2-D2 just show the little tape again, and it looks like a Force Ghost anyway.
Yeah, right? Which is already a hologram. Why not a Force Ghost?
But I mean, it'd be cool and different because that'd be the first non-Jedi to be one.
Well,
that we've seen at least.
But she kind of is, though.
Is she?
Yeah, I mean, Luke trained her.
Yeah, he taught her some stuff, but like to really say that she's a Jedi.
Well, I mean hey, listen.
It's got to be like some
graduate. If Rey's a Jedi,
how many
Leia's a Jedi.
How many credits do you need to graduate from the academy?
But he did away with all that stuff. Remember?
Oh, he did the Miyagi thing. Like,
yeah,
belts
it's
don't
like,
matter.
Look, Leia. Here's the thing. If Rey could be a Jedi with the little crap that she knows,
but she's not one yet.
Well, he said, "I'm not the last Jedi," and then Rey's out there, like has all these like rocks like levitated and stuff. Even with her powers,
Force and he saw that she was.
But even in the powers that she has, right? Let us remember that Leia was blown out into space, actually regained consciousness, pulled herself back in. That's pretty impressive.
Another Rian Johnson flaw.
I think you're a flaw or not. It happened.
It's canon, I know.
It's canon. If you can do that, you're a Jedi. Luke did a lot less than that, and he was a Jedi, so.
All right.
Plus, she's a granddaughter of the Force. I mean, let's give her a little bit of a break.
Yeah, she just is by default.
She's kind of a Jedi by default. It's kind of like a participation trophy. Everybody's a Jedi now. The Broom Kid's probably a Jedi by now.
Oh, Lord.
All right, well, on that, see, that was more Duel of the Fates than Duel of the Fates.
We actually had to calm down.
Yeah, right. Getting a little heated over here. All right, well, that's our show today, everybody. So, like I said, many times during the show, if you guys like what you hear, whatever, be sure to subscribe to this podcast. You can find it on Apple iTunes. You can find it on a lot of podcast channels. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Eric Vansel Media. It's a really good channel. We're going to have all kinds of different things on there. And, of course, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. So, again, that's our show for this week. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.